All right, I just want to make sure that I am live. All right. Looks like we are good to go. Hi, everyone. If you guys are new here, welcome. My name is Jordan. I am the founder, CEO, whatever you want to call it, of Boss Life in Progress, which is a career and confidence coaching business that where I help young professionals kind of figure out what they want to do and then to get there. And today we have a very special guest, and I will actually let her introduce herself, but she's amazing and she is she's a part of my sorority. So, I had to bring her on here. And so if you would go ahead and introduce yourself and let everybody know a little bit more about you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jordan, for inviting me. My name is Karenthia Barber, and I am a consultant, strategist, speaker, and coach who operates at the intersection of education, business, and politics. For over 20 years, I have provided opportunities to positively impact the lives of thousands of individuals, whether they were looking to grow or start their business or career, improve their communication skills, leadership skills, or customer service skills. And I am a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I know we had this scheduled for another day, and so I'm so glad you were able to join us today. And you already kind of answered the first question I like to ask my guests, which is tell me about yourself. But I want to get right into like the nitty gritty of why I wanted to have this conversation. A lot of times I talk about getting the job and I talk about resumes and all that technical stuff, but we don't really ever talk about what happens after, right? What happens after you get into the workplace and how to actually succeed as you move along in your career. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is what advice would you give someone in pursuing a career and or a business such as yours?
Okay, I would say do your research. Study those who have done what it is you're trying to do and been successful, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to modify it to meet your needs. Build your network. And when I say network, genuinely connect with people of like minds, people who have similarities, so that you can utilize them as resources, whether it is information, support, encouragement, or even mentorship. And I think that's so important, having, no matter what field you're in, having at least one mentor in addition to a coach. But it's important to have all, just like we have a dentist and a doctor, and, in our professional lives, we need to have those resources, because that is an investment in ourselves that will pay multiple dividends for us throughout our careers.
Definitely. And I've heard a lot actually about having a mentor and a coach. So can you kind of give those who are watching now and then those who are going to be watching this replay, can you give kind of a definition for both and how they're different?
Excellent question, because many people use them interchangeably, but there is a significant difference. A mentor is one who shares and provides information, so it's more telling and guiding. A coach is one who creates a space to support you in your evolution, in your transformation, by asking the right questions, by prompting, by challenging you. So a coach doesn't tell you what to do, the coach helps you get there. Whereas the mentor may say, I need you to show up at this particular meeting, or I think you should join this particular trade organization. So they are telling you what to do, but a coach doesn't do that. A coach helps to guide the process.
I love that. I think people, like you said, people do get it mixed up because it can be such a confusing thing, I guess, especially for people who haven't had a mentor in their life or who haven't invested in a coach yet. So they kind of interchange them and they become one big thing. Mm-hmm. And I heard the three types of people that you're supposed to have are a mentor, a coach, and a sponsor. And I've heard that multiple times. And can you kind of talk about a little bit about it, what a sponsor is and how it kind of also flows into that?
Okay, so a sponsor is one who is saying, I believe in you and I am going to present you or vouch for you in terms of connecting you to my resources and my network. So it's like when we became members of Alpha Kappa Alpha or any of the others who may be watching who are in any type of organization, someone sponsored you. So they put their reputation and word on the line on your behalf, saying that I can attest to the character and qualifications of this individual. So that a great question, because I agree. We need to have both, all three actually, sponsor, mentor, and a coach.
Awesome. I think as a young professional myself, when I knew the difference between a coach and a mentor, but when I heard sponsor, I was like, what? I've heard the word, but I was like, I didn't know exactly to the extent of what a sponsor could actually, help you do, because I was so familiar with coaching and mentoring. And you mentioned earlier about networking, and I think my target demographic are young professionals who are either within like 1 to 5 years of their career, or those people that are looking to transition in their career. So can you talk a little bit more about networking and how to actually build one, right? Everyone tells us you got to network, but how do you actually do that?
Okay, one is positioning yourself. You have to go where people are. And in this current environment of the pandemic, that in most cases means social media. You and I connected on Clubhouse.
Yes.
And that is an excellent way to network. If you are on any other social media platform, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, or even Twitter, if you come across someone's profile who you think, or they may be in a field that you're in, or you're aspiring to be in, reach out to them, introduce yourself, share with them what your goals are, and ask for them to give you 5 or 10 minutes of their time. Most people respond very favorably to that. In addition to that, if you need to connect with a professional organization in your field, so whether you are a social worker or a teacher or whatever field you're in, there are organizations specifically for people who are in your field. You need to get connected. Not only become a member, but actively engage. That means serve on committees, volunteer, or even become an officer of those organizations. That's how you broaden your network. Also, community engagement. There's so many community organizations that need volunteers and support. So I would encourage you to volunteer. A lot of the things that I have been able to do in my life really resulted from my volunteer or activism in the community. People saw what I was doing, recognized it, appreciated it, and then invited me. They would say, well, we need you. Would you like to serve on this particular board? Because we've noticed all that you've been doing in a particular area. And from that, things evolved and other relationships I built. So all of those things are so important in terms of networking. But I also want to add, networking does not mean reaching out and asking people to do something for you. Networking is about genuine connections and looking for how you might support or help that person initially. and without any expectation of a return.
Yep.
That's what networking is about. And whatever the return might not come from that particular individual. It may come later down the line from someone that you met through them, or, you know, is connected to you in some other way. But it's always about extending yourself first, not expecting someone to do something for you.
I actually agree, because when I talk to people about networking and they ask, okay, how can I network and get a job in 2 weeks? I'm like, it doesn't work that way. It's a long-term strategy. And if you do it correctly, you won't have to always start from scratch. And I love how you said to be authentic and show them how you give value. A lot of times we don't want to go for opportunities if it doesn't have some sort of monetary, monetary solution for us, or monetary gain for us. But when you do things like volunteer, get on boards for organizations, even join organizations and go to the meetings, you never know who you're going to actually run into, or your name might pop up in a room that you're not even in, because you're doing all these volunteer things and you're doing, being in organizations. And I think a lot of times people, they just want it quick. And they're not willing to put that time and that effort into networking. And then when you try to tell someone, no, you have to network and it's going to be a long process, they're like, no, how can I skip to the front of the line? And I'm like, well, you can't build relationships like that.
Yeah, not at all. And people don't respond favorably to folks who approach them in that manner.
Right. Because it turns into, and I tell people not to do that. I tell clients, I tell people who I'm just giving advice to, they're like, okay, how do I reach out to, like, say, a recruiter or someone? And I'm like, well, you don't reach out and say, hey, I want a job. Because they're gonna be like, okay, so do these other 50,000 people in line.
Exactly.
But when you reach out to them and you're building authentic relationships and you're asking about the company and the company culture and things that, like, normally people won't ask about, that's when you start sticking into the mind of, the recruiter or the hiring manager or whoever you're trying to stick into the mind of. But it actually, and I kind of wanted to touch on this topic as well, because we're really talking about communication and workplace etiquette. And I just wanted to talk about how building relationships within a company that you're in to like climb the ladder, how does that work, as far as like making sure that you aren't brown nosing, as they say, but you're doing it authentically?
Sure. Yeah. So I believe that effective communication is the foundation for personal and professional success. So, and I subscribe to a formula. Interaction gives rise to communication. Communication gives rise to relationship. So the more we interact, the more we should be communicating. And the more we communicate, we're building strong relationships. And that principle applies personally and professionally. So when I talked about being authentic, we have to show up, we have to be genuine, and we have to communicate effectively. So for some of us, it may mean learning what I call another language, because the language that we use at home and with our friends and our family may not be the appropriate or effective language to use in our workplace. So we need to study the culture. No matter what organization you're a part of, there is an organizational culture. So look at people who are on 1 or 2 levels above where you are, and what do they do? How do they dress? How do they interact? Okay, and I said, how do they dress? Because organizations do not have dress codes. However, there is still something called appropriate workplace attire. And while it might be a relaxed environment, it's important for us to understand that everything about us communicates something. So before we've opened our mouths, people have heard us, and people have made some kind of assessment based on what they've heard. So that means how we show up in our attire, our attitude, even whether we're smiling and have a pleasant facial expression or frowning, all of those things make a difference in terms of the workplace. So that opens up opportunities for us then to show up in terms of other behaviors. So are we complaining all the time to our coworkers? Or are we offering to help when we see that there's added workload or there's a need? And, we say, I go to your leader, team leader, supervisor and say, I noticed we had this new project coming in. If you need some additional support, I'm willing to help. Those are the things that separate individuals from the masses. Okay. Those who show, there's an expression, if you show up on time, you're late. Time is communication. So what time do you show up on time and then go take a break and then get your coffee, get your breakfast, and then come back to your workstation? All of those things are being evaluated in the workplace. So it's important to understand that things that we might be accustomed to doing and how we might engage with others in our social environments may not be expedient to our career advancement. Looks like we may be having some technical difficulties, but bear with us.
Am I back?
You are back.
Okay, I apologize. Oh, my goodness.
This
technology.
Happens. It's
I
okay.
was into it too. I was like, I'm listening. Oh my goodness. Okay, hopefully that doesn't happen again. I think we're back live. All right. We're good. Okay. Sorry. So back to what we were talking about. So you mentioned communication in the way we dress, the way our facial expressions and attitude. How can we come off as authentically ourselves without feeling like we're stuck in a box? A lot of times people, especially young people, and you have that generational mix in the office, and so young people maybe feel like they're constricted or it's too too stuffy. And so how do you combat that?
Well, I would say that if you're feeling that way in the environment that you currently work in, then you need to be talking to Jordan about looking for another career. Because the reality is, when we work in any environment, there's a certain organizational culture. And in addition to that, there's office politics. That's the reality of the real world, whether we like it or not.
Yep.
So I would say to one of my, if one of my clients were to say that to me, then we need to do some assessment and and there are assessment tools that help you identify your ideal work environment and look at coupling that with your interests and your skills and your abilities. And the more you know about your personality, and whether it's the Myers-Briggs personality type or DISC, when you have that information, then you're in a better position to make informed decisions about what environment you want to work in. We all have those options, and unfortunately, too many people, don't take the time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's understandable. I mean, we all like to eat. We all like to have nice clothes, and we like shelter. So we need employment. But the worst thing is to be in an environment for a long period of time and not be comfortable and not be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Many times I meet people after 25 or 30 years of employment, and they say to me, I'm ready to do what makes me happy now.
Mm.
That saddens me.
Yeah.
That you have given that much of your life and you weren't happy. And I believe it is possible, but it's about understanding and having the information and the awareness. And that kind of goes back to the importance of a coach to help you with those kinds of things and that level of awareness. I am self-employed. I've been in business for over 20 years. But the reality is, depending on what client I might be going to visit pre-COVID, would dictate how I dress when I show up. There are some environments that what I have on now would be perfectly fine, but there are other environments that I need to have on a suit, a business suit, a tie, what I call the uniform, because it's a more conservative environment.
Right.
Early in my career, I would not put highlights or color in my hair. Because I knew the impact that might have on what people heard from me. And some would say, well, you should be able to do what you should, and you could. But if it's important to you, and I believe representation is important. So I made decisions that I would do what was necessary to get me into environments so that I could have an impact and make a difference. Once I've done that, then I have more flexibility to be more individualized in terms of how I show up.
Yeah, I like that because I think, and I think you should be able to, do things that are like within reason, but everything is not for everywhere. And so a lot of times, especially in the corporate world, it's like, why can't I wear, my purple hair? And it's like, well, it's nice. We love it. But at the same time, is that what your company culture or organizational culture dictates? And if you're not, working at Apple on the beanbag chairs, it's kind of hard to say, to justify, okay, hey, I have purple hair in the workplace. I actually saw this great TikTok. And she was saying that like purple hair or she was saying colored hair is not, all different colors is not unprofessional. For the context that she was talking, she was saying things like the service industry or things where people aren't going to so much, like judge your looks. But it's true, when you get into that corporate world, that office job, your communication starts with your looks. And I wish it wasn't like that. I wish we could rock all our, purple, green, pink hair all we want to. Right. But at the same time, unfortunately, you have to play the game. So
you do. You have to know the rules and play the game based on the rules. And many times people spend their time trying to fight and resist the rules. And I advise people, you're not going to be successful. That's like banging your head up against the wall, trying to move that wall. That culture has been there, will be there. And if it's not something you're willing to make minor modifications to be successful, and I would say short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. You don't have to stay there for the rest of your life, but make sure you get what you want out of it in terms of the experience and the knowledge that you can leverage for your personal benefit and personal career.
Exactly. I think people get stuck on, I have this job, now I have to stay here forever. And it's not, you don't have to stay anywhere.
No.
in today's culture, especially, people are very worried about seeing. I had someone ask me, they were at a job for like 2 years, and they asked me, is it okay now that I want a different job? I don't want to seem like a job hopper. I said, well, 2 years is a long time.
In today's environment, you're right. There used to be that would have been frowned upon. Mm-hmm. But in the last 10 years or so, the average employee stays two, maybe 4 years before they move around. I have a nephew who graduated from college in June of 2019. Got a job on Wall Street, and he just started a new job a month ago.
Okay.
So less than 2 years. Mm-hmm. So it's happening now at a more accelerated rate if you are, communicating in a very professional manner, showing up, demonstrating your worth and your value. You can accelerate that schedule and advance either within the same organization that you're in, or take that and advance outside of that and move to the next organization.
Yeah, I think people are too afraid of seeming like job hoppers, but I don't see how you are a job hopper if your jobs are accelerating or progressing. Mm-hmm. So no one's going to fault you if you've had, 3 jobs in the last 2 years, but they've all been like raises and promotions, and, like you're moving up. Right. I think people they don't have a plan. They don't have a strategic plan. They're like, I'm just going to go to this job and then this job and then this one. And then you're like, well, what's your plan? What are you trying to do? And that's something that I really try to drive home with my clients and with people I talk to, is like, what's your plan? Right. If you don't have a plan, then everything's going to seem like a rat race because you don't know where you're going.
Exactly. It's like, I'm going on vacation, but I'm just going to drive.
Where are you going?
Where are you going? What's the destination? What's the game? Yes. And you're absolutely correct. There needs to be a plan, and everything you do, and I say this to kids in junior high or high school or college, every decision you make today will impact your ability to reach that ultimate destination. So we need to be very strategic about moves, alliances, networking, relationships, experiences, so that they're all coming together to, like a bridge, to get us to where that final destination is.
Exactly. And kind of segueing into that. So if you're talking to maybe not so much like middle school or high school, maybe college, or even those young early professionals, what would you say to someone who asks you, what's the first step that I need to take if I eventually want to become a leader in my organization?
Work on your communication skills. I mean, that's, and unfortunately, no one tells us that. Right. Most people don't get training or a course in effective communication. And, people do the best they can with what they have, but most people are challenged. And with many of the, a lot of clients will call me and say, hey, we're having some morale issues, or we're having some, dysfunction. More often than not, the root of it is ineffective communication, because breakdowns in the communication process gives rise to conflict. Mm-hmm. Well, what do we need to be able to do to resolve conflict? We need to be able to communicate effectively. So if we were challenged on the front end, we're going to be challenged in our ability to resolve workplace conflict. So we have people who, teams and units that become dysfunctional because people do not have the skills to express their dissatisfaction or their frustration or, what they need to be successful. And that is an essential skill for leadership. There are lots of studies that have been done that indicate that companies value interpersonal skills over
Yes.
technical competence, because they can teach you the technical aspects of a job,
Mhm.
but it's more difficult to teach the interpersonal skills. So when you work on the earlier you work on communication skills, you are putting yourself in an advantage, in a position of advantage when you enter the work world. I work with many new leaders on helping
Mhm.
them develop their communication skills. And it should happen, in the reverse, but unfortunately it doesn't.
Right. Yeah, I think it's funny you say that, because you started talking about how you work with organizations and like low morale and people expressing their dissatisfaction. And a lot of times what I find is that people don't have the confidence to even vocalize the fact that they're dissatisfied. Like you say, they're going to complain to their coworkers, they're going to complain to any and everybody except the person that can actually make the change for them. And so how would you encourage someone or tell someone who's having these low morale moments or is dissatisfied, how do they approach with that effective communication?
So I would go back to exploring. It starts with self-image. Our
Mm.
self-image impacts our self-confidence, and our self-confidence shows up or informs our behavior. So if I have any issues with my self-image or my self-confidence, and most people do, because the
Mm.
reality is there are affronts to our self-esteem and self-confidence every day. From the time we wake up, sometimes it's whoever lives with us who might say, "Why are you wearing your hair like that?" Or "Why do you have that on today?" And those many people internalize those things. And if we don't have a healthy emotional intelligence, those things can be very self-defeating and cause us not to have the confidence to engage in an effective and healthy way to communicate what we need or what we want from our work environment.
I think that's really powerful, because I'm a career and a confidence coach, so I try to help people on both aspects. Because it's not just the, like you said, it's not just the technical skills. It's how do we communicate, use those interpersonal, even those other soft skills. How do we use that to kind of push ourselves forward? And a lot of times, what happens is that people are afraid to ask for what they want. And I actually posted something a little while ago, and it was basically said, do you guys remember the saying, closed mouths don't get fed?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just saying, like, imagine what you would possibly have in life if you just asked, right? And we have this fear of rejection, and so we don't ask.
Mm-hmm.
And
the worst thing someone will say, no.
that's what I was going to say. Yep. The worst thing to say is no.
Right. And, and there's an expression, the more no's you get, the closer you are to the yes. But many people, because of their lack of self-esteem and self-confidence, internalize no's or rejection as a rejection of them as a person, and not the ask or whatever it is they proposed. It's not saying you're not a good person or you're not worthy. It's just saying that this particular idea is not something we want to go with at this particular time.
Right. I definitely agree. I think especially, I mean, really anyone, but I just target young professionals, so I always talk about them. But it's difficult, and we can get back into the generational thing, because I do want to talk about that. But it's difficult if you're not super confident in yourself to say, hey, raise my hand and be like, I have an idea, or I think this should be this way, when you have a ton of people in an older generation telling you, no, this is how we're going to do it today. And you're just like, well, okay, I guess I'm gonna do that. And so it's difficult in the workplace, because I think that, you know, it's good to have like different generations, because then the ideas keep flowing and everyone can be super creative, and you have the experience, but you also have like the new and the bubbly. But I think that the older generation might get a little annoyed with the younger one, and the younger one doesn't know how to deal with the older one, and then we just have a mess in the office.
Well, yes. And I actually do training on cross generations at work, because currently we have 4 generations working side by side in the workplace. And each generation has been socialized very differently around everything from communication to work behavior. So there are times when I work with leaders in organizations who have concluded that the employee is lazy or doesn't have a good work ethic. You know, I help them to understand that it's a different orientation. You know, each generation has a different orientation around work, as well as how work fits into their life. You know, many people in the older generation, work was everything. And, you know, that's not the case for everyone. Right. So we have to get to a level of maturity and understanding and appreciating that this is just added dimensions of diversity. Diversity goes well beyond race and gender and sexual orientation. Each one of us brings a multitude of diversity with us, even those of us who look similarly on the outside, and even those of us who are in the same generation. Everyone who is in your generation doesn't show up in the same exact way, and neither does everyone in my. It's an individual thing based on many things: background, experiences, education, all of those things. So I would say we all need to work on creating environments that are healthy, open, and comfortable for everyone to share, and help facilitate the understanding between everyone on the different generations. And once we get to that level, then we won't have that reluctance of anyone not wanting to share. You know, once we work on creating those kind of environments, then, you know, and not taking things personally, depersonalizing it, and understanding people are not, challenging your beliefs or telling you that everything you've done for the last 20 years is not appreciated. But there are other ways to look at things, and other ways that we might want to think about how to approach things in the workplace.
Agreed. I think if everyone just keeps an open mind, we will all be okay. We
all just get along.
You said that we have different ways of approaching work, and I like that, because for me, send me an email. I'm good. Send me an email. It doesn't have to be a meeting.
Don't bother me. You're like, don't talk to me. Just send me an email.
Other people are like, no, we need to have a meeting to discuss what we're going to talk about the next meeting. And I'm like, okay. So I think it just really depends on, yes, your generation, but I think it really depends on personality. And we kind of talked about this earlier. And so how do you feel because you have different like programs and trainings where you actually help employees, but also organizations in the field of like development. So how does someone develop themselves into, maybe they don't want to be a leader, maybe they just want to be a little bit more confident at work. And so how do they work on that development?
So I have a number of assessments or check sheets that I use to have people respond to certain questions, and to get to the root of the challenge, or where did I get this idea? Or why do I believe certain things? We have to understand the source of it before we can help shift the dimension or the dynamic of it. And doing, the more we learn about ourselves, the better position we're in to make informed decisions to do something differently. So, and whether that is, if people often say, I'm shy or I'm introverted.
Yeah.
Or I hear people say, well, that's just how I am.
Oh, that's a pet peeve.
That is one of mine as well. Who we are instinctively or by nature is one thing, but how we choose to show up and engage with others is a higher level decision. So we each have an opportunity to decide, regardless of how we are instinctively, how we're going to show up. So, if I prefer not, if I am truly introverted based on the personality indicators, that doesn't mean I can't interact with other people. That means that I need to do the work on recharging my battery and be prepared for more stimulation and take care of myself so that interaction and stimulation doesn't exhaust me like it would normally. Yeah. And that's why, that I share that, being that you said it was your pet peeve. People often use that as an excuse for not doing something differently. And that is a career altering statement. And that's important for people to understand.
Agreed. And people are just like, that's how I am. And I'm like, what? I was like, you have the ability and the wherewithal and you can feel it. So if you're introverted, right? Like you said, find a way to recharge your batteries. Just because you're introverted doesn't mean that you can't, come out of your shell, like they like to say, and do things that maybe you're not comfortable with. And I talk about this all the time. People are so comfortable in their comfort zone, and they're so much so that they're uncomfortably comfortable. So they don't like their job. They don't like the people in their job. They're underpaid, and they want something different, but they're so afraid of something new. And they say, well, I'm not the type of person to A, B, C, and D. And then I say, well, I guess then you'll be the type of person to sit in a job that you don't like. And I don't want to be like super blunt, but sometimes you got to give people some tough love and say, at this point, it's you. And it's not anything that's going around you. It's you. And you have the ability to change everything for yourself if you just get out of your comfort zone. I was actually speaking to someone, and I was, giving them just advice, because I think advice, it's just out there for everyone. And they told me, I know it's good, but I just don't want to. And I said, what? What? I was like, okay, that's fine. That's fine.
And everybody has that right to make that decision. But don't complain about where you are if you're not willing to do the work to get to where you want to be.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be I think people are thinking it's going to be like this huge, like grand gesture all at once. A lot of times it's just you chipping away a little bit at a time. I wasn't able to even I'm a confidence coach, and I wasn't able to get on camera before I actually started, working on that inner stuff you were talking about. And people don't realize that it starts on the inside. They want to do all the technical stuff. They want to, let me go back to school and get a degree and get all these computer certifications. I'm like, but can you have a conversation with someone without, feeling like you're going to explode? Like that's something that we need to address before. Like, school is awesome, get the certs, get the degrees, but it's the softer skills, it's the communication, it's the leadership, it's those things that are going to, hold you above the rest.
Absolutely. It will distinguish you from the masses. and accelerate and catapult you to other levels of success when you work on enhancing those skills.
Definitely. And it's all about, at least what I think is, it's about enhancing the skills that are going to get you to where you want to go. So obviously we all need communication. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we can get around. And I think people spend so much brain power trying to get around it, like we were talking about earlier, instead of just being like, okay, you know what? Maybe I am an introvert, but I'm going to take this little 30 minutes that I have to do this interview or this presentation. I'm going to kill it, and then I'm going to go back in my little bubble. But mm-hmm. people try to find ways around it too often.
And the more you do that, the more comfortable you will become moving out of the bubble. And so that we have to become uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's how we grow.
Yes, definitely. And I keep looking over because I'm trying to be cognizant of time, but I just want to know, we talked about communication, mm-hmm. and I want to really talk about like etiquette, because mm-hmm. we haven't really talked about workplace etiquette. And so I think that really goes along with like company culture, because some things are okay and some things are not. Mm-hmm. So how do we, beyond just like, okay, I'm not in the company yet, how do we look for things in the company culture when we're not already there?
That we can get to that by the questions that we ask mm-hmm. when we're doing our research. Mm-hmm. So before we decide that this is a particular company I want to be a part of, I would suggest doing an informational interview. And when you have that conversation, asking some very intentional questions that will get to culture. If you've already accepted the job, then you can do the same thing in terms of the question, or if you're in the interview for the position, you can ask the same kinds of questions that will, questions like, are there opportunities for socializing? Are there team activities? Are there team meetings, and how often are the team meetings? How many people who are currently in management were promoted from within the company?
That's a good one.
That gives you some insight into the organization. I'd also want to know, what's the average years of service of employees who currently work here? Because if everybody's leaving, if you only have a few long-term employees, mm-hmm. that says something. Now, I'm not saying what it says.
Right.
You have to figure out what it says, but mm-hmm. that's some information. So the more data you can gather through the questions that you ask will be critical to you understanding the culture.
Yeah, I think that's important because you said it before. It's important to do your research, and a lot of times, like you said, I want a job because I want to be able to eat and have clothes and things and nice things. But beyond that, we kind of get content in what we have. And so the thought of like doing the research and going that bit of extra mile, especially when you already have a job, mm-hmm. I find that sometimes people kind of get complacent in what they have, and they're like, oh, I don't need to do that extra, that extra bit of work because I have a job. And if I want to get a different job, I'll just get to it when I get to it. But I think when you do that research and you actually look for a company that is going to almost match you in like values and morals and things like that. I know mm-hmm. I had a client who was very like she was very like socially conscious. So mm-hmm. she wanted to work for a company that was like very diverse and socially responsible and things like that. And that was something that was really important to her. And that's something that we worked on as we went through the program. And so I don't think people really think about those things.
And that is so important. And I often tell clients, first, you have to be clear about your values. Okay, what are your non-negotiables? non-negotiables, okay? And most of us aren't very clear about that. So we need to be clear about that before we get in an environment where they might be challenged. So, you know, are my personal values a good match for the corporate organizational values of the place that I'm going to be working? And in the case of, you know, now with the internet, we can do a lot of research on organizations in terms of what does the leadership look like. That tells you something about the organizational value. Okay. If it is a publicly traded organization, what do they invest in?
Yep.
What do the board members, you know, where are they from? What do they do? What are their backgrounds? All of those things we can access. And on LinkedIn, you can even get information about demographics of employees, different organizations. So yes, looking for a job is a job.
Yes.
But it's time well spent to ensure that you're not leaving one unpleasant situation and going into another. So I would encourage anyone who's looking to move into another organization, do your research and be very clear about your values, your expectations, what's important to you, and will that environment provide those things for you? And if not, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not the place to go. Is it something that you can do for a short period of time? Be very clear about what you're going to gain from going to that organization, specified timeline, you know, and I believe that the time that you should start looking for a job is when you accept one. I tell people that update your resume and always be looking for the next opportunity.
Okay.
And if you do that, then you can use that as a stepping stone to get to where you ultimately want to be.
Wow. That's actually interesting. An interesting concept. Like, look for a job as soon as you get one.
And what I mean by that is always be mindful of how this experience, my engagement here, my networking here will help me. It goes back to the plan that you talked about. Have a plan, then I need to always have in my mind, how does this fit into the plan? And how is this taking me closer to the destination?
I 100% agree. I think that if you're not strategically placing yourself, and it might not be every day I wake up and I'm like, okay, this is the plan, but having some sort of at least overview of what you're going to do, because a lot of times when I am talking to young professionals, it's, oh, I just want to do this. And I said, okay, but what's next? And they're like, oh, I don't really know. And so there's nothing wrong with not knowing, but to have a job and then continue to not know where you're going to go, you're kind of just like floating down the river, and it's like you just don't know what you want to do. And if you don't know what you want to do next, not saying you have to have your whole life planned out and know your purpose at 21, but if you can at least know what's next, now I know that in this job, I need to network with A, B, and C. I need to learn the skills of, X, Y, Z, whatever. Like, you have to be able to, at least at the minimum, plan your next move.
How does it all fit together?
Yes, definitely. We have a little bit more time. So I have been working a lot with women, and it's not that I don't work with men. It's just that women tend to be the ones that, come to me. And I wanted to ask this question for the ladies. And I wanted to say, what's the best way to get ahead at work for women in more male-dominated industries?
Great question, particularly during this Women's History Month.
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about communication.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to know about the difference in communication styles, okay, particularly as a female leader. And, traditionally, women and men communicate from a very different communication pattern.
Mm-hmm.
You notice I said traditionally, because there
Yeah.
are many women who, because of how they were socialized, communicate from a more masculine style.
Right.
So it's and it coupled with personality type, because as you know, personality type helps us to understand by default how we prefer to receive information.
Okay.
So understanding that it may be some things we need to do to alter how we communicate in that environment.
Okay.
We have to, and that personal work has to have been done before
Mm-hmm.
we show up, because that's not the time to be tentative.
Right.
I have had the pleasure of serving as the first female
Mm-hmm.
board chair of the Maryland Auto Insurance Company.
Okay.
So all male dominated environment.
Yeah.
So in terms of what I communicated, in terms of when I showed up,
Mm-hmm.
when I talk about our communication or our leadership messaging, it's everything from the time you walk in.
Yes.
And you got to make sure that you have prepared yourself with those internal messages, that you have are very clear about your agenda, about
Mm-hmm.
competence, about your expertise.
Yes.
Not have a problem with conveying that,
Mm-hmm.
commanding respect from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like Madam Vice President when she said, "I'm speaking,"
Yes.
because many times when women leaders are in male-dominated environments, people think they can interrupt us when we're talking. We can't allow that. We can be
Mm-hmm.
very we have to communicate with tact and diplomacy, but be very clear when we
Mm-hmm.
communicate of what's acceptable and what's not.
I think that pretty much sums it up, because, and it goes back to your non-negotiables. Like, obviously you wouldn't accept disrespect like in your personal life, so why are you going to let people cut you off and talk over you and do all this other thing disrespectfully in your professional life? And I think that as women, it's getting a lot better, but it's still kind of like trying to force your way through the glass ceiling, as they say. And I think it's just important for as women to not only make sure you know what you're talking about, and also make sure they know what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Know that you know what you know, but be sure that you convey to them so that they know that you know what you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Someone was like, what? But exactly. And I think that was a great place to kind of wrap this up, because it is almost an hour, but I have loved talking to you. I'm going to put up your Instagram on the screen, but can you tell people how they can find you? And I'm going to make sure I put all this information below the video as well, but can you let them know?
Okay, yes. So on LinkedIn, it's Karenthia Barber. And on all social media, it is KB Motivator.
As I can't see what I'm spelling. So KB Motivator. Okay. Right. Correct?
Yes.
All right, guys. So you can find Mrs. Barber on KB Motivator. And what was the LinkedIn again?
Karenthia Barber. my full name on
Barber.
LinkedIn.
Yes, guys. And I will go ahead, sorry.
Yes, and if anyone who is viewing this would like to have a 15-minute complimentary conversation to kind of sort things out or need some added support, reach out on Instagram. There's a link, actually on LinkedIn and Instagram, there's a link that you can schedule a conversation with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And guys, like she said, if you need to figure something out, if you need to thank her, to tell her about, how awesome this interview is, please reach out to her. You guys know that you can reach out to me on Instagram at naturally by Jordan, and also on my website, bosslifeinprogress.com. If I can find bosslifeinprogress.com. And I want to thank you so much for blessing us with your knowledge today. It was a really great conversation, and I am definitely going to be reaching out to you again. So, because I won't let you be a stranger.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed being with you.
All right. So, guys, thank you so much. And I will leave her information down in the description below. And you guys have a wonderful night.
Good night.